Okay, welcome back in once again. Today I'm going to be taking a look at America's team. How about them Cowboys? Is a meme that will go on until the end of time. Um, a very disappointing season if you're a Cowboys fan. Obviously, every single year you have playoffs on your mind. Unfortunately, this was not the year. As you can see, they would finish third in the NFC East with a record of 7-10. Now, with any video that I do, there's going to be certain players that I'll definitely be keying in on. And the one thing that definitely derailed the Cowboys season this past year was the injury to Dak Prescott. Once he went down, the team just wasn't the same. They tried to be competitive up until the end. Unfortunately, they were 3 games below 500 once the season was all said and done, and missing out on the playoffs for the first time since I think like the 2021 campaign, if I'm not mistaken, which was ironically Mike McCarthy's first season as a Cowboys head coach. And this past season would be his last. So 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So in the 5 years that he was there with the team, they would make it to the playoffs 3 seasons and only winning one wild card game. Okay, let's take a look at the team stats. We'll take a look at their full schedule as always. So they started the season off on a good note, winning against the Browns. They would lose to the Saints and Ravens respectively before bouncing back to beat the Giants and Steelers, only to lose to the Week 6 opponent, which was the Detroit Lions. So heading into the Week 7 bye, they were at 500, 3-3. Wasn't so bad, but then you can see all the L's after that. They would lose 4 straight games to the 49ers, the Falcons, the Eagles, and the Texans before finally getting a win against the Commanders and the Giants. Then they would lose to the Bengals, win against the Panthers and Buccaneers, and then unfortunately they lost their last 2 division games against the Eagles and Commanders respectively, ultimately dooming their season. So now I'll take a look. So you can see on the screen, they finished third in the NFC East. On the offensive side of things, they would finish 11th in passing. They had 3,862 yards. They would also finish 11th in receiving yards with 4,092 yards. First downs, unfortunately, they were 23rd in the league. They only had 83 total first downs. Rushing yards, they were 27th in the league. They would finish with 1,705 yards. And points, they were 21st in the league. They would finish with 350 yards. Sacks, they were third in the league, at least with 52 sacks on the season. Interceptions, they were 13th in the league, ironically with 13 picks. Forced fumbles, they were fifth in the league. They had 18 forced fumbles, and tackles, they were 15th in the league, right around the middle of the pack with 658 yards. So their defense didn't play that poorly. You can see sacks, they were third in the league, and basically every category they were in, they were either in the top 5 or the top 15, respectively. So their defense didn't play poorly. It's just their offense didn't put up as many points as they would have liked. For the special teams, field goal percentage, they would finish second in the league with 40 field goals, only trailing the Steelers by 1. Their field goal percentage, they would be 15th in the league, 85.1. So unfortunately, they would miss a few field goal tries. Extra points made, they were 30th in the league, which was 23rd overall, and their extra point percentage was still 100. So again, with the extra point percentage and the extra points, I think they're just going by the amount of times that they've kicked it and made it. So if one team, say, kicked 40 extra points and the other team kicked 30, they both made all of them, but because you had 10 more than them, you're going to finish higher in the standings. And that's pretty much it. Now we'll take a look at their individual stats, I should say. So Dak Prescott, no surprise here, would finish despite missing a good chunk of the season and not being able to play, which is basically the same thing. He almost finished with 2,000 passing yards, 1,978 passing yards on the season. He would finish with a 64.69% completion and 11 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. So his ratio wasn't really that game. It wasn't really that great. It's almost like you got for every touchdown, he basically got a pick at the same time. CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver, would finish close to 1,200 yards, just 6 yards shy on 101 receptions, and 6 touchdowns as well. Jalen Tolbert would finish with 610 receiving yards. He had 49 catches and 7 touchdowns. Rico Dowdle, I believe, if I pronounced that name correctly, he would finish with 1,079 rushing yards on 235 attempts and 2 touchdowns. And Ezekiel Elliott came back to the Cowboys. He finished with 226 rushing yards, 74 attempts, and 3 touchdowns. Micah Parsons on defense, the linebacker would finish with 12 sacks. He had 30 total tackles, 2 forced fumbles. Eric Kendricks, the middle linebacker, would finish with 71 tackles. He had 3 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 2 interceptions. And because he led the team in interceptions, he's on the screen there yet again. He had 3 pass deflections as well. So that should be all cut up to date when it came to the stats. I'll just have to make sure the screen doesn't fade away. So again, a very disappointing season for the Cowboys, missing the playoffs for the first time since missing the playoffs after making it 3 straight seasons. There we go. That's what I was trying to go for. Obviously, if Dak didn't get hurt, the Cowboys likely would have finished possibly even 10-7. They could have had their record flipped around. There's no question about that. So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but injuries are definitely the one key factor into how poor a team is going to end up being. Yes, there have been cases where guys got hurt and somebody else stepped in and the team performed better or just as good. But unfortunately, Dak is the guy for the Cowboys. And because he got hurt, their season was ultimately doomed. Didn't matter how much Cooper Rush did in his absence. It just wasn't enough to make up for his loss. Going into next year, it's tough. I think next year, it might be a little harder, if I'm going to be honest with you, for the Cowboys to get back into the postseason. For me personally, I think the Eagles should have that NFC East locked out again. But the Washington Commanders are knocking on their door. And I think the Commanders finished with 12 wins on the season, which was the first in a long time for the Washington franchise. I think they're going to be just as good, just as competitive next year. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys again finish 3rd in the NFC East. Like I said, between the Eagles and the Commanders, I think those 2 teams should be the top 2 in the NFC East, if I'm going to be honest with you, unless they happen to get rattled by injuries or turnovers or whatever the case may be I think it's going to be very tough for the Cowboys. I think if they had been healthier and, Dak played the full season, that maybe there was a slim chance Dallas could have finished slightly ahead of Washington, but they were 5 games behind Washington once the season was all said and done. So again, I think next year is going to be tough. It could possibly be 2 years in a row that they miss out on the playoffs, only because there's only 3 wildcard spots available. And right now, I think the Commanders, if they don't get the division next year, they should be there again when it comes to a wildcard spot. And then when I think about the NFC North, I think both the Packers and the Lions should get in the playoffs next year. So that's 2 wildcard spots just right there. And then going to the NFC West, I think the 49ers or the Rams, and possibly let's even put in the Seahawks there, because it was a closer division than what a lot of people thought. So I think one of those 2 teams or one of those 3 teams could possibly be the other wild card team as well. So can the Cowboys make the playoffs next year? Sure, any team can make it. Will they? That's the big factor right there. I don't know. Because again, I just think that with the talent that Jaden Daniels has and the Commanders have, I think they'll be competitive. And again, the Eagles are locked into a playoff spot. No ands, ifs, or buts about that for next year. So I think it'll be very tough if you're a Cowboys fan. I'm not going to sit here and try to beat around the bush. I wouldn't be surprised if they missed out on the playoffs again next year. But they could surprise me and surprise a lot of people as well. But again, just because of what I saw this past year and how inconsistent they were, on offense at least, it's hard for me to believe that they're going to be better than the Commanders and or the Eagles themselves. So again, if you're a Cowboys fan, don't take this to heart. I don't need any, lash out or whatever anyone to lash out just because of what I saw from my perspective. But I think next year will be tough. Doesn't matter who they bring in as a coach or who they bring in as players or who they draft. Again, just because of this past season and only because of this past season, I think it'll be a tough road to hoe for the Cowboys. All right, that's going to take care of this video. As always, if you're new to this channel and you like this type of content, feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and appreciative as well. Until next time, and as always, take care.